In a world where deception lurks beneath the surface of seemingly perfect facades, there are those who weave webs of control so intricate, so insidious, that they trap their victims in a suffocating grip of manipulation and deceit. These individuals, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, are not merely masters of psychological warfare. They are skilled in wielding ancient dark forces to cement their power. When their hold begins to weaken, when their carefully crafted illusions start to unravel, they turn to darker arts. Astrology, divination, sorcery, necromancy, witchcraft, spiritual weapons designed not just to dominate but to spiritually oppress, control, and destroy. These predators don't just want your mind or your heart. They aim to invade your very soul, leaving you spiritually shackled and emotionally drained, while they quietly revel in your suffering. Understanding the depths of their tactics is not only critical for survival, it is essential to protecting everything you are and everything you are meant to become. Narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths are notorious for their ability to manipulate and control others, using tactics that often go beyond psychological abuse. In the darkest corners of their manipulative arsenal, some resort to literal witchcraft, astrology, sorcery, divination, and necromancy in their pursuit of domination. These individuals, when sensing that their victims are breaking free from their grip, turn to these occult practices to hinder, sabotage, and spiritually oppress their victims. Through dark rituals, they weave webs of control designed to ensnare their victims physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. When narcissists, sociopaths, or psychopaths begin to lose their grip on a victim, they may resort to casting powerful spells and engaging in dark rituals. These spells can bind the victim's mind, body, and spirit, keeping them dependent, confused, or trapped in toxic cycles. Binding spells can emotionally tether the victim to the abuser, creating an overwhelming sense of guilt or dependency that keeps the victim coming back despite the abuse. These dark practices may involve charms, incantations, or amulets designed to restrict the victim's potential and ensure their failure. Additionally, these individuals may use other forms of sorcery such as curses, hexes, or malefic spells to attack their victims' health, relationships, and prosperity. The goal is not just psychological manipulation, but to create tangible, real-world effects that prevent the victim from thriving. Similarly, astrology, though seemingly more benign, operates on the premise that the movements and positions of celestial bodies, planets, stars, and the moon, have a profound influence on human behavior and life events. Grounded in the belief that the cosmos reveals a deeper, interconnected order, astrology suggests that the alignments of these celestial forces at the time of one's birth can offer illuminating insights into personal characteristics, psychological tendencies, and even the course of one's destiny. Throughout history, astrology has been used both for enlightenment and for darker purposes. In the biblical narrative, the wise men, or magi, are an example of astrology being employed for good. Guided by their knowledge of the stars, they followed a celestial sign, the Star of Bethlehem, which led them to the newborn Jesus. Their astrological insight allowed them to recognize the significance of his birth, prompting them to offer gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, symbols of reverence and recognition of the divine nature of the child. In this case, astrology served as a tool for wisdom, guiding these learned individuals to fulfill a sacred mission and honoring the arrival of a spiritual savior. In contrast, the same celestial knowledge was twisted for malevolent purposes by King Herod. Upon hearing of the birth of a new king of the Jews, Herod consulted astrologers, seeking to learn the exact location of Jesus. Fearing the loss of his own power, he used this information to order the massacre of all male children under the age of 2 in Bethlehem, in an attempt to eliminate the perceived threat to his reign. Here, astrology was weaponized, not for wisdom or enlightenment, but for the cold, calculated exercise of power, resulting in the tragic death of innocent children. The requisite requirement, as illuminated by Scripture, is that only those with pure hearts can genuinely commune with God and discern His will. Individuals who are inclined toward the study of astrology often do so with impure hearts, driven by a latent yearning for dominion, control, or esoteric knowledge that stands in opposition to divine truth. As the Bible proclaims, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God," Matthew 5, verse 8, "and who may ascend to the hill of the Lord? He who has clean hands and a pure heart," Psalm 24, verse 3-4. These sacred texts affirm that true communion with God and spiritual insight are predicated upon the purity of one's heart. Conversely, those whose hearts remain unpurified, seeking to wield astrology as a means of cosmic manipulation, inadvertently open themselves to the forces of darkness, inviting spiritual deception and subjugation. Astrology in this context can become a slippery slope where curious individuals, in their pursuit of knowledge or power, may unwittingly find themselves stepping into portals that lead them astray from divine truth. Rather than uncovering enlightenment, they risk entangling themselves in a web of falsehoods, where spiritual clarity is replaced by confusion and their connection to the divine is severed. This reality highlights the inherent duality of astrology itself, a tool that can be wielded for both noble and nefarious purposes. The example of the wise men, whose celestial understanding guided them to honor the birth of Christ, contrasts sharply with Herod's perversion of the same knowledge to further his tyrannical ambitions. In both cases, the application of astrology was determined by the purity of the heart and the intentions behind its use. Today, astrology similarly retains the potential for both insight and manipulation, where its power is contingent upon the integrity of the one who seeks to use it. When approached with humility, discernment, and alignment with divine truth, astrology may offer genuine insight. However, when driven by selfish, impure motives, it becomes a tool of spiritual distortion and control. In this context, it is important to recognize that individuals with malignant tendencies, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, are often adept at exploiting astrology for their own gain. These individuals engage in a meticulous study of their victim's astrological chart, analyzing key life events and emotional patterns with chilling precision. Through the scrutiny of astrological transits and progressions, they pinpoint moments of vulnerability, times of personal crisis or emotional upheaval, and strategically manipulate these junctures to sow confusion, chaos, and self-doubt. In doing so, they transform astrology from a tool of cosmic insight into an instrument of psychological control, obstructing their victims' growth and undermining any potential for success. Beyond their astrological manipulations, these individuals frequently attune themselves to the rhythms of the lunar cycle, particularly the full moon, as a means to further tighten their control. The full moon, imbued with potent energy and a symbolic connection to heightened emotional states, provides them with a prime opportunity to amplify their manipulative tactics. With an acute awareness of its influence, they exploit the lunar cycle to intensify the emotional volatility of their victims, using it as a tool to deepen their psychological grip and perpetuate a cycle of instability and subjugation. Healthcare professionals have long observed a correlation between full moons and a rise in unusual occurrences. Many nurses and midwives report an increase in hospital admissions, particularly in emergency departments, as well as a notable spike in births during full moon shifts. Around 40% of medical experts believe the full moon has a measurable effect on human behavior, suggesting that its influence may extend beyond superstition and into the realm of observable impact. This belief in the moon's power adds an additional layer of psychological leverage for those seeking to manipulate others, allowing them to exploit both celestial and natural cycles to maintain control over their victims. In a similar vein, divination, the practice of seeking hidden or mystical knowledge about the future, becomes a potent tool for narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths in their manipulation of others. Methods such as astrology, tarot cards, or consultations with occult practitioners allow these individuals to uncover pivotal moments in a victim's life, moments of opportunity or vulnerability known as kairos moments. By identifying these critical junctures, They gain the ability to strategically interfere, obstructing potential growth, success or freedom, and consolidating their psychological hold over their victims. Kairos is an ancient Greek term meaning the opportune or right moment, an ideal time for action, often carrying a sense of divine timing or a critical opportunity. It refers to a moment when everything aligns for a person to make significant progress, experience breakthrough, or change the course of their life. For narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, these moments are a direct threat, as they recognize that if the victim fully realizes their potential during a Kairos moment, they could break free from the toxic cycle of manipulation and control. Once these moments of potential breakthrough are identified, the manipulator moves swiftly to interfere, often using occult or spiritual tactics to sabotage the victim's chances. This could involve casting confusion spells to induce doubt, using psychological manipulation to trigger insecurity, or orchestrating events that block the victim from seizing the opportunity. The narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath knows that if the victim realizes their true potential, whether in career, relationships, or personal growth, they might break free from the manipulator's grasp. Therefore, every effort is made to keep the victim trapped, unable to fully manifest their power or move forward in life. In the Bible, a vivid example of divination for control appears in the story of Laban and Jacob. In Genesis 30, verse 27, Laban admits, "I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." Laban's use of divination reveals how he became aware of Jacob's influence on his success. In the context of narcissistic manipulation, this shows how abusers will exploit divination not only to track a victim's potential, but also to strategize ways to trap and exploit them, ensuring the narcissist maintains control over their circumstances for as long as possible. In a similarly pernicious manner, within the confines of family structures, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths often resort to occult practices such as necromancy, the invocation of spirits, not merely as a tool for manipulation, but as a means to subvert the very potential of the one chosen to break the generational curses and spiritual bondage that plague the family line. These manipulators, astutely attuned to the innate gifts or prophetic calling of an individual capable of disrupting the toxic equilibrium of the family system, will identify and target this person as a threat to their dominance. The chosen one, often marked by a unique strength, insight, or divine purpose, represents the possibility of transformation, healing, and deliverance. Once this individual is singled out, the manipulator, in a calculated and malicious act, will resort to necromantic rituals, summoning malevolent forces to assail the victim's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. The intention is to suppress their potential, divert their path, and prevent them from stepping into their redemptive role. In so doing, they reinforce their own control, ensuring the continued subjugation of all within the family, perpetuating a cycle of oppression and spiritual darkness that keeps the family ensnared in a perpetual state of dysfunction and disempowerment. The objective of such dark interference is to extinguish the victim's potential before they can recognize who they are destined to become or break free from the entrenched dysfunction that holds them captive. Through necromancy, these individuals seek to control the victim's life, perpetuating a cycle of confusion, instability, and despair, effectively trapping them in a state of perpetual vulnerability and preventing any real chance of personal liberation or transformation. In certain families, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths orchestrate a particularly insidious form of manipulation through what can be termed a destiny transfer. This involves the calculated effort to steal the destiny of one individual and transfer it to another, typically to themselves or their own children. With obsessive precision, they manipulate this individual's opportunities and life path, steering them into stifling environments and circumstances that prevent them from realizing their true potential. This form of spiritual subversion effectively consigns the victim to an interminable cycle of dysfunction, a recursive state of entrapment in which their potential for transcendence is systematically thwarted and their spiritual and psychological faculties remain mired in an unbroken pattern of stagnation and regression. In their insatiable quest for unchallenged dominion, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths engage in an unparalleled commitment to obliterate any and all threats to their supremacy, vowing with an almost metaphysical tenacity to extinguish the divine glory and potential of their victim. For these individuals, the struggle is not confined to mere psychological or emotional manipulation. It is an existential battle wherein the victim's liberation represents nothing less than the abuser's ultimate annihilation. The abuser is acutely aware that should the victim transcend their oppression, reclaiming their rightful autonomy and glory, the very foundation of the manipulator's power will collapse. In this high-stakes power struggle, the narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath views the survival and flourishing of the victim as an existential threat, one that, if left unchecked, could precipitate their own spiritual and literal demise. To this end, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths often cultivate a sinister syndicate within the family, a covert alliance of individuals who, either willingly or through manipulation, rise up together in coordinated opposition to the victim. This unholy coalition, comprising close family members, becomes an active force, suppressing the victim's potential and reinforcing the abuser's iron grip on the family dynamic. Each member of this syndicate is carefully recruited and bound by the manipulator's will, ensuring that the victim's every move is thwarted and their efforts to break free are continually undermined. The family unit, once a source of support, transforms into a prison, with the abuser at the helm, orchestrating the victim's oppression. This dark phenomenon finds resonance in the profound words of Christ in Matthew 10, verse 36. "A man's enemies will be the members of his own household." The very individuals entrusted with the roles of protectors, nurturers, and supporters of the victim become, in this twisted reality, the foremost agents of their torment. The manipulation of familial bonds, wielded with Machiavellian precision, transforms the family unit into a labyrinth of deception where love becomes a mask for control and trust becomes the very instrument of subjugation. Within this diabolical construct, the victim's plight is not only emotional and psychological but deeply spiritual, as the abuser, with the complicity of the family syndicate, creates an impenetrable fortress of oppression from which escape seems all but impossible. But the machinations of the manipulator do not stop within the family. They extend outward, sending agents into the victim's life from the outside, friends, co-workers, spouses, and even complete strangers, each carefully selected and positioned to further isolate, destabilize, and control the victim. The narcissist or psychopath understands that their power does not only come from direct manipulation, but from creating a web of influence that extends beyond the immediate family, ensuring that anyone the victim interacts with becomes a potential instrument of their subjugation. In this way, the victim is not only trapped by those closest to them, but by a vast network of external forces, all working in concert to maintain the manipulator's control. When the victim, desperate to escape the grip of the abuser, seeks deliverance, the manipulator ensures their efforts are thwarted at every turn. In a particularly insidious move, the abuser may steer the victim toward a false prophet or deceptive spiritual leader, one who claims to offer healing or deliverance, but whose influence only deepens the victim's spiritual bondage. These false prophets, often aligned with the manipulator's own desires for control, redirect the victim's faith and hope, keeping them ensnared in a cycle of spiritual confusion and oppression. By sending the victim to these counterfeit sources of help, the abuser continues to maintain their power, preventing any true liberation from the spiritual and emotional prison they have built. Necromancy is not merely a tool of spiritual oppression, but a sophisticated component of a broader, insidious strategy aimed at maintaining dominion over the family's collective fate. In a parallel vein, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths may also deploy witchcraft and occult practices to target their victims' most intimate and personal aspects, such as their reproductive health. Just as necromancy is used to control destinies within a family, these dark spells, specifically curses designed to tie up the womb serve to thwart the victim's ability to fulfill their natural potential. Women may suffer infertility, repeated miscarriages, or stillbirths, while men may experience sexual dysfunction, sabotaging their ability to father children. These malevolent acts are designed not only to cause profound emotional and physical pain, but to maintain a psychological stranglehold on the victim, trapping the couple in a sterile, unhealthy relationship that blocks the possibility of growth, healing, or fulfillment. Yet even when a couple manages to break free long enough to conceive, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths often turn to dark forces to sabotage the unborn child. Witchcraft and curses can lead to autism, developmental delays, and other debilitating conditions that keep the child from reaching their full potential, while simultaneously keeping the parents trapped in a cycle of suffering and despair. These attacks are not just on the physical body of the child, they are spiritual assaults designed to frustrate and break the family's hope. The manipulator takes great satisfaction in watching the victim's pain, knowing that the child's struggles will keep the parents emotionally destabilized and unable to break free. In the relentless pursuit of control, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths often wield what can be described as arrows of insanity, insidious dark forces specifically aimed at destabilizing their victims' mental and emotional equilibrium. These malevolent assaults warp the victim's perception of reality, sowing confusion, self-doubt, and emotional upheaval, which can escalate into full-blown mental illness. The manipulator's goal is to create a distorted and chaotic environment where the victim feels as though they are losing their grip on the world around them, constantly questioning their own thoughts, perceptions, and sense of mental clarity. This calculated manipulation not only breeds profound doubt, but also isolates the victim, fostering an increasing dependence on the narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath for validation. As their mental state spirals into disarray, the victim becomes more vulnerable to further control, ensnared in a psychological labyrinth from which escape seems increasingly impossible, further solidifying the abuser's suffocating grip. In much the same way that these psychological manipulations ensnare the victim's mind and emotions, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths also turn to witchcraft to extend their dominion over the victim's material world. Through dark rituals, curses, and spells, they target the victim's financial well-being, careers, and businesses, invoking malicious forces to create ruinous blocks that ensure the victim remains trapped in a cycle of dependency and scarcity. These financial hardships may appear as sudden job losses, bankruptcies, or chronic economic crises, all of which keep the victim tethered to the manipulator. By keeping the victim in a state of constant financial struggle, the abuser ensures that they remain incapable of achieving independence, thereby cementing their control over the victim's life and reinforcing the toxic, parasitic dynamic of the relationship. Adept in the dark arts, narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths often craft demonic ordinances, spiritual decrees designed to bind entire bloodlines, imposing lifelong restrictions that span across generations. These ordinances are far more than psychological manipulation. They function as malevolent spiritual laws that impose limitations on key aspects of life, including marriage, finances, career progression, health, mental stability, and even fertility. Through dark rituals and occult practices, these individuals set invisible barriers in motion, sabotaging their victims' chances at fulfillment, success, and stability. The manipulator derives twisted satisfaction from watching the cycle of suffering continue, ensuring that each generation remains shackled by the same struggles, unable to escape the grip of their oppression. The effects are insidious, with the potential to trap victims in an endless loop of thwarted ambition, broken relationships, and unfulfilled lives. At the core of all these practices is the abuser's sadistic desire to control and dominate. Using witchcraft, astrology, sorcery, necromancy, and dark occult practices, they manipulate their victims, forcing them into submission through emotional, spiritual, and physical torment. The manipulator takes perverse pleasure in the suffering of others, seeing the victim's pain as a means of asserting their own power and superiority. By wielding these dark forces, they ensure that the victim remains trapped, oppressed, and unable to escape. The sadistic nature of these individuals is not just personal, it is a driving force behind their attraction to cults, secret societies, and organizations like Freemasonry. These environments, with their hierarchical structures, rituals, and power dynamics, provide a fertile ground for abusers, sociopaths, and psychopaths to further assert their control over others. Within these settings, they revel in humiliating, degrading, and subjugating others. Whether through hazing, manipulation of power structures, or enforcing oppressive rituals, these organizations become an ideal stage for the manipulator to perpetuate their sadistic tendencies and derive pleasure from the suffering of others. In these secretive groups, the abuser can keep people bound to their will, thriving off of the fear, submission, and suffering of those beneath them. The manipulation and humiliation of others are not simply tools for advancement, they are sources of fulfillment. The manipulator feels an insatiable need for superiority and dominance, and these environments offer the perfect cover to exploit the vulnerable, ensure their control, and perpetuate their sadistic pleasure. The Bible offers a stark description of the nature of the abuser, particularly in Proverbs 6, verse 16 to 19, where it states, "There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community." These characteristics align precisely with the behavior of narcissistic, sociopathic, and psychopathic individuals: arrogant, deceitful, cruel, and divisive. Their actions not only embody the traits described in these verses, but also represent a direct affront to the heart of God. Their manipulations, lies, and spiritual oppression serve to maintain control and dominance over others, while their cruel actions reveal a profound disregard for the well-being of those they exploit. The peril posed by narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths transcends the ordinary realm of human malice. It is a catastrophic force, intricately woven into the fabric of spiritual warfare. These individuals, skilled in the art of manipulation and cruelty, are not merely embodiments of human depravity, but are, in essence, instruments through which darker, demonic forces operate. They are vessels of Satan's will, expertly employed to weave webs of deceit, control, and destruction. As believers, we must grasp the profound reality that our true adversary is not flesh and blood, but the malevolent spiritual forces that seek to devour and corrupt. Satan does not manifest in overt, grotesque forms, as one might expect, with horns, a tail, and a pitchfork. Instead, he operates covertly, infiltrating the human heart and working through individuals who have yielded to his influence, sometimes consciously, sometimes unknowingly. Scripture admonishes us to recognize the irreconcilable gulf that exists between light and darkness. The Apostle Paul, in 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14, rhetorically asks, "What harmony is there between Christ and Belial, or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever?" This stark question underscores the profound incompatibility between the divine and the demonic, the holy and the profane. To align oneself with those who embody darkness, those who serve as vessels for Satan's insidious designs, is not merely a dangerous misstep, it is spiritually ruinous, a subtle form of spiritual suicide. Narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths are emissaries of this very darkness. Their actions manifestations of a diabolical agenda to manipulate, control, and spiritually enslave. As Christians, we are called to be vigilant, discerning, and unwavering in our commitment to truth. These manipulative agents of darkness seek to infiltrate our lives and lead us astray, subtly undermining our connection to God and corrupting our sense of self. Having examined the satanic tactics employed by these agents of destruction, Module 6 will provide you with the knowledge, discernment, and spiritual weaponry to break free from their insidious grip, liberating you from the chains of oppression and restoring your life to its divinely ordained purpose.